Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, A.J. Mahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, A.J. Mahari.
A couple things before we start this episode. I have a website for this podcast, and it's at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. Interactive website. It's a website is its own feed for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a lot of the videos that aren't in this podcast, you'd like to check those out, you can do that at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. I would just like to encourage you to please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast if you find it helpful, to help this podcast keep growing and keep reaching more and more people who could benefit from this content. I get a lot of people with BPD rating it at 1 star because, they have all these problems with what I'm saying, and they think it's horrible and disgusting and all that kind of BPD kind of stuff. Now, let's dive into today's episode. In this podcast episode, I'm going to be talking about the fragmented self in people with borderline personality disorder, which is especially formidable and central and core when they are untreated, or unless they are exceedingly well treated. Why can't they hear you? And this podcast is important on its own, I think, but it's I did this primarily in response to someone's comment and questions on a video I did, I think probably a good 7 years or so ago, called BPD Externalizing Out, Painful for Loved Ones. So a commenter comments with this. The thing I've seen missing in my understanding for many years is why. Why can't people with BPD take it in? What you're saying, how you're feeling, what you're trying to share. Why can't they take anything in? And the person says those hour-long conversations, and many of you may relate to hours and hours and hours long, 13 hours long, 10 hours long, J.A.D.E conversations where you justify, argue, and defend and try to explain yourself and everything. And they're like, what are you talking about? And they feel like they're being victimized by you, and you're just trying to explain how you feel or share something and be heard. So in those hour or hours long J.A.D.E conversations where you think every avenue of empathic, patient, understanding, and gentle explanation and communication of their impact on you has been explored. You've tried. You've said millions of words. You need to be heard. So you've explored and explained and tried to get them to understand how you're feeling and why and what hurts and maybe a myriad of other things. The commenter then continues to hear that there is no self there to hold it, to take it in, as I talked about likely in that video as well. The commenter continues to hear that there is no self there inside the person with BPD untreated to hold what you're saying, to take in what you're saying or what you're sharing. Commenter says, I'd love to understand that more deeply, AJ. Have you already done a video on it? Well, I think in many ways, in many podcast episodes and videos, I've been kind of always or often talking about this to one degree or another because it's such a core central reality in borderline personality disorder that many people in relationships or a relationship to someone with BPD, whether you're the partner, whether you're a relative, whether you're a friend, whether you're the favorite person, which by the way is not a healthy place for you to be. I've touched on this many times in many ways, but I can totally understand why maybe more people need to keep trying to understand it more deeply. So here I'm at it again, which is fine because it's something that people, especially with codependency, just don't really want to take in yourselves for maybe similar but yet different reasons then people with BPD can't hear you, can't take in anything you're trying to share or give or explain, or especially when you're feeling hurt or you have needs that are unmet. And so the commenter says it's like your words go straight into their unconscious, as their lack of self, fragmented ego, doesn't allow input to be processed in the same way as, quote, normal, unquote. Well, and while that's true, I wouldn't really recommend that people that are in agony, going through, all that you go through, trying to figure out how to get the borderline back, trying to have how to relate to this person, etc., with codependency and in a world of hurt yourselves, I wouldn't be throwing around the word normal because it's not really important. But to people with BPD, are they able to process and take in and hear you as other people might? No. The commenter continues, or that they are still in a dissociated state, so your words aren't being perceived fully, ? Or even during those long conversations, those justify, argue, defend, explain ones that you're doing all the work in as usual, because of the communication impossibility with people with BPD, which I'm going to speak about here. So the commenter says, or even during those long conversations, you are still being perceived as object other. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to a person with borderline personality disorder, you are always perceived as, quote, object other, unquote. Whether it is object other representation of good parent never had in idealization, or whether it is you are the persecutory, bad parent, wounding parent, bad object other in devaluation, here's what I'd like you to hear today. Unfortunately and sadly, you are not seen, you are not heard, you don't get validated, and you are not actually known for the individual that you are by anybody with untreated borderline personality disorder, because you are always object other. And due to the lack of self, for people with BPD, they don't have the self to relate to, and they can't relate to other, because how can they tell the difference really deeply emotionally? This isn't about a lack of intelligence on their part, but how can they really emotionally understand the difference between self and other when there's no boundary there? There is no understanding there, emotionally speaking. So you are always object other. And that's why these relationships cannot work out, because you're never going to be seen, heard, validated. You're not going to have your needs met by them, because they don't really know who you are, because they don't know who they are. And the commenter continues, so the content of your words gets ignored or is ignored, and what they take from it is, quote, feel good, feel safe, parent is giving me attention and holding me. Yes, or the exact opposite. Oh, you have feelings and therefore you're abandoning me. That's a feeling, not a statement on the part or a thought on the part of people with BPD. And it can be very much that they're feeling like you're abandoning them, you don't care about them. You're the opposite of what the commenter describes here often will be perceived by people with BPD. And the commenter continues, perhaps all of the above. Love to know your thoughts. Thanks for the great videos and insight over the years. Well, you're really welcome. That's at Jamie Quigley. So now let's really dive into hopefully what will be a more helpful and a deeper explanation that I have to offer here for this very core unfolding communication and possibility in a relationship with anybody with BPD or patterns of, and not even diagnosed, but unless until significantly treated. This is the core of why these relationships don't work, can't work. You can't rescue them, you can't fix them, you can't save them, you can't change the reality. And so that's basically why you need to take care of yourself and get into therapy and break the trauma bond of the, quote, relationship, unquote. BPD fragmented self, why they can't hear you. I'm going to get into this most disorienting, painful reality for anyone in any relationship type with someone who has either undiagnosed patterns of BPD or untreated BPD, or, like I continue to say, they would have to have exceedingly well-treated BPD to not still present this communication and relational impossibility, which is exceedingly painful for them and for anybody who tries to relate and be in relationship to and with them. And that's not always just significant other relationships. It can be friendships, the favorite person thing that people with BPD have going on, which isn't healthy for anybody. Siblings, could be a parent, and all those types of things too. The impossibility of healthy communication with people with BPD is at the core here. The absence of any mutuality or reciprocity with a person with BPD is something that people with codependency or people in relationships, all different types, continue to deny or not understand or just not want to know, because you continue to kind of throw that over to the side because you're going to try harder and harder anyway. And it really is futility and awfully painful. You communicate millions of words, each with so many of your feelings and love attached. You try so hard over and over again. Your words don't connect to the borderline. You are not heard or understood. You can't find validation. And that's maybe not all you're trying to communicate about. The borderline cannot meet you in any or all of this communication when you're in the mix as well. Because to them, the first experience as you start to talk is they just feel, and they might not even know this, but they feel abandoned because the focus has shifted off of them. And that's not just about narcissism. That's a protection of, if you're seeing me, the borderline, if they're feeling you, if you're seeing the borderline, then they feel like they're okay, sort of, because they're experiencing identity through you. But if you're talking about you, if you have feelings, and of course you do, and you're saying things about your experience, or you're asking questions, or even if you're expressing love, etc., when it starts to be anything remotely involving you, which you should be able to be involved in a relationship, right? Well, when it starts to be involving you at all, they feel abandoned. And or in some of your communication, they can end up just feeling engulfed because they're probably not emotionally understanding it at all. And they often just start defending. But you're not going to get heard. And borderline personality disorder, among everything else, is basically at core a relational disorder. And it's about communication impossibility, lack of mutuality, lack of reciprocity. These are very key ingredients that are needed to have a, quote, healthy, unquote, relationship. So why don't your words seem to matter? Why don't your words, your feelings land? Why doesn't your love even get in there half the time? Why are you not really ever actually heard? Why does all you share end up being, for the borderline, all about them? What happened to you? What happened to what you were saying? What happened to, why don't they see you when your words seem to not matter and they don't land? And what about you? Well, the borderline's always busy with what about me? That lack of self. What about the me I don't know? I'm trying to get me through you. How can you exist too? Because now what's happening to me? And those are feelings. That's not like anybody with BPD would say that, or even maybe consciously know that. People with BPD are lost in a protective, angry, childlike vortex of his or her incessant lens of victimization, which goes back, for most people with BPD, to their childhoods and to some really traumatic experiences they've had. You try to share your experience and your feelings. You ask questions when you feel hurt or something went awry and you're trying to figure out what happened. You explain, you clarify, you reassure, and express your love over and over. And maybe you have some questions in there, etc. But somehow, nothing you say lands. It's like the conversation resets all by itself, but you're still trying to have it. It's like you never said a word, or worse, your words get distorted, weaponized, or erased entirely. This episode is focusing on a really core aspect of why it is impossible to relate and maintain relationships that they can only be toxic and very unhealthy with anybody with BPD. And I don't say that to belittle people with BPD. It's just a communication, relational reality that people with BPD may not want to know about, and many people who are trying to relate to them aren't so thrilled to hear. Because this is core, and this, I hope, will help you to realize, no matter where you are in relating to somebody with BPD, no matter what that relationship type is, it's really not going to work out for you, and you really need to take better care of yourself. In this podcast episode, we're going to explore the internal psychological structure that blocks your message from being received by people, especially with untreated borderline personality disorder, but unless exceedingly well treated. So the first part here, the fragmented ego of people with BPD, means there's no cohesive person, self. There's no receiver there to receive everything you're sharing and or trying to give or asking questions about. To understand why your words don't land, we have to talk about ego fragmentation in borderline personality disorder. In psychological terms, please hear this, the ego isn't about arrogance in this way I'm speaking about it. It's about structure and or lack thereof. It's about lack of cohesion. It's about the fragmentation in the ego of people, in each ego of anyone with borderline personality disorder, something that they can address in treatment, but it does take quite a long time and a lot of work. A healthy ego is part of the psyche that holds identity, reality testing, boundaries, and emotional regulation. It's the self that receives, reflects, and integrates experience. But in borderline personality disorder, especially untreated, that ego is often underdeveloped, split, or fragmented off, with the lost self and the self that receives, reflects, and integrates experience. That self doesn't exist within people with BPD. It's absent, it's not known, it's not formed. There's no sturdy psychological container inside the person with BPD. There's no consistent self to receive your words or your feelings even, or your care. So when you say something clear like, quote, I love you, but I'm hurt by what happened, unquote, it doesn't get integrated as a coherent message. Instead, the person with BPD may flip between polarities. Maybe hearing, quote, I'm bad, you hate me, you're leaving, unquote, or fearing that and feeling that and perceiving that or misperceiving that. Or they might be hearing, feeling, misperceiving that what you're actually saying right now is, quote, you love me, you'll never leave me, I'm safe for now, which... The second one, the first one is about abandonment, and the second one is it will lead to engulfment fear, and sometimes pretty quickly. They can't hold both love and conflict, warmth and boundaries, care and accountability, not because they're unwilling, but because they're psychologically unable to without intensive treatment and a lot of inner work in therapy. Part 2, identity diffusion and the disappeared borderline self. Let's go deeper into identity diffusion, a concept developed by psychoanalyst Otto Kernberg. Identity diffusion means there is no solid, consistent internal image of self or others within people with especially untreated borderline personality. People with BPD often don't have a stable sense of, quote, who am I, unquote. In fact, they just really don't have that. So their perceptions of you and themselves shift rapidly depending on mood, fear, or perceived threat. And also triggers involved in there. But again, people with BPD often don't understand, as maybe a lot of people with codependency and people that are relating to people with BPD don't understand. When people with BPD get triggered to dissociation, to dysregulated emotion, to being really combative and protective and everything, the trigger isn't anyone else's fault. The trigger can come from the environment, but again, it's hitting on the triggers that are internal to each person with BPD. But when people with BPD experience a trigger, like emotional dysregulation, feeling abandoned, etc., They think it's your fault. They think it's coming from outside of them, but it's really coming from inside of them. But they don't know that consciously. So when you speak to a person with BPD, even with love, patience, and reason, there's no stable inner anchor to receive the meaning of your words. Emotionally, we're talking about here, right? Because people with BPD can be highly intellectually intelligent, but that doesn't help with all of this. Instead, your message gets filtered through a defense mechanism like splitting. You're either all good or all bad. Projection. You're the one attacking me, from the borderline's perspective. Projective identification. You made me feel this way. Now fix it. How dare you? What you meant as connection or questions or trying to foster more understanding in your relationship or just being really nice to them gets interpreted as criticism, abandonment, or invalidation. That's why your words don't land. They shatter against a fragile and fragmented self in the borderline. Part 3, dissociation, the emotional blackout. Another major reason your words don't land is dissociation, a defense mechanism that kicks in when emotional overload hits, when that triggered emotional dysregulation is happening inside the person with BPD. In the middle of a calm, emotionally intelligent conversation, a person with BPD might suddenly check out, lose focus, or appear to regress into childlike behavior, or may just totally shut down, or may start raging at you. This isn't always conscious. They may even look at you, nodding or crying, depending on the reaction, but not actually register really anything, if much, of what you're saying. The nervous system in a dissociative state in a person with BPD prioritizes survival, not understanding. Your words don't get encoded in memory. Your logic doesn't land. Your love isn't felt in the moment. It's given. To you, it might feel like you're being gaslit later, but what's really happening is a neurobiological defense inside the person with BPD. They couldn't process the moment or the hours of conversation at all. Part 4, the psychological firewall. When all these elements come together in a person with BPD, fragmentation, identity diffusion, dissociation, and emotional dysregulation, what forms is a psychological firewall. This firewall blocks accountability, responsibility, intimacy, empathic feedback, emotional truth, any kind of expressions of your love or reassurance. It just blocks everything, really. Not because the person with BPD is evil or manipulative, but because their psychic structure is designed to survive, not to connect. And this is what's at the core in borderline personality disorder that takes an inordinate amount of therapy. Like, seriously, it's going to take 13 to 16 years because all the other work that can get done. But borderline personality disorder is a disorder in which people, for whatever reasons, many varied reasons, and trauma often at the center of those reasons, do not know how to connect because they have lost the self inside of them. And as Melanie Klein said in Object Relations Theory, that, quote, the abandonment trauma that a person with BPD usually does experience by or before the age of 2, by the way, but the abandonment trauma causes the psychological death of the otherwise burgeoning authentic self. And this is about emotional arrested development, where the person with BPD was starting to become like a burgeoning sense of self, a burgeoning self. Boom, cut off, lost, fragmented, emotional arrest occurs, and throughout the rest of early childhood development, person with BPD is not developing more of that self, is not in contact with that self. And so that experience in and of itself, that's not about people with BPD being evil or manipulative. It's about people with BPD and the inherent core of borderline personality disorder as a relational disorder. And with all kinds of communication deficits, with an inability to attach, with an inability to trust, with an inability to connect. Because when you don't have a self, you're not connected to yourself. And if you're not connected to yourself, you can't be connected to anyone else. Though people with BPD do try exceedingly hard, it just doesn't work out. And that's about the emotional arrested development and the loss of self. And while you're trying to reach them with sincerity, honesty, or even a boundary, that firewall is still running. Their system says, quote, truth equals danger, intimacy equals threat, feedback equals rejection, and of course distance equals abandonment. And so your message, deleted, blocked, erased. Part 5. What you must understand and accept that is so difficult and painful, but really crucial for you. Here's the painful truth. You can't be heard by someone who doesn't have the internal architecture of a self to receive you, from which to hear you. No matter how emotionally intelligent, spiritually grounded, or compassionate you are, you cannot build a borderline, a self. You cannot patch the fragmentation with your love. You cannot speak coherence into a psyche that splits and dissociates in its ego fragmentation and loss of self. This doesn't mean they're unworthy of love. It means that loving them will not land until they do the difficult work of healing, which I will continue to say takes a good 8 to 10 to 16 years, 15, 16 years. And they're not just going to age out, ladies and gentlemen, despite what you hear in the echo chamber. You cannot force integration from the outside. You cannot fix dissociation by explaining yourself again, or again, and again, and a million times more. You're not being heard. You're not being seen. They don't have that capacity. They really don't know who you are. Think about that. Because no matter how much you care about them, and no matter how much they are worthy of being treated, in a reasonable way, but you've tried, and then you keep getting hurt. Well, that's not okay. Something has to give here, right? And it's often not going to be what people want it to be. You want the relationship to work. These relationships can't work. Final words here. Let go of the burden to be understood. But of course, realize that you need to be understood, because all of us as human beings need to be understood. But if you're trying to love someone and keep a relationship going with someone who can't understand you, doesn't even know who you are, can't keep a consistent sense of who you are because they don't have a self, then let go of the burden not only to be understood, but how can you, knowing this, keep abandoning yourself and keep trying to be heard by somebody that can't hear you? If you spent months or years trying to say the right thing in the right way, over and over again, walking on the eggshells, trying to be very careful with your every word, hoping that this time, out of a million times, this time, or the next time even, they'll hear you. Let this be the moment that you surrender to that fantasy, to that want, to that hope, to that false hope. Surrender to the reality that they can't hear you. And if they're untreated, and you can't sit around, I'm going to get them into therapy, and maybe in a few months it'll be different. Nope. You're abandoning yourself. You need to be understood, but you can't be understood by a person with the patterns of BPD, diagnosed BPD, and not exceedingly well treated. So if they're untreated, not well treated, refusing therapy, let this be the moment you surrender and understand this relationship can't work out. What are you doing to yourself? Why? And try to exhale and realize that, yes, there's going to be a lot of pain for you to deal with, but you need to rescue you and your wounded inner child. You have agency over that in working with someone, and I'm out here to work with anybody that resonates with me. You weren't wrong. You weren't too much. You weren't impossible to understand. You were just talking to someone who inside was split in too many pieces to receive you, to see you, to hear you, or anything you said ever for what it was, for what you were communicating, for who you are. They never heard you, never received anything that you said as a whole. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Today's episode was for everyone who's ever asked a question, why can't someone with BPD hear me? Why don't they get it? Now you know. It's not because you're broken. It's because their self is lost, fragmented, emotionally arrested, and as many studies of borderline personality that I've read reveal and conclude, in untreated BPD there is, quote, nobody home, unquote. There are studies out there on borderline personality disorder basically called things like nobody nowhere. That's what they're exploring, and that's what they have realized, I think, for a long time about people with borderline personality disorder. It's a tragedy, and it becomes a tragedy for those who love them as well, especially when they won't go get treatment, and that treatment takes so long, too. So you can't predicate that you're going to save your relationship if you just tell them that you think they have BPD, and then they can go to therapy and it's a straight line or something from there. Not at all. There just isn't anybody there in the sense of a container of known self. Keep walking in clarity, reclaiming your peace, and speaking your truth, with the knowledge and painful realization there can't be a healthy relationship with an untreated person with borderline personality. They can't and won't hear your truth. They won't even accept or trust your love. They can't hear your pain. They are not aware of what your needs are. They don't know how to meet your needs. They can't meet their own needs. They don't understand your hopes or your dreams because they can't relate to that. Maybe intellectually, but not emotionally. All you try to share bounces off the borderline protective firewall of a fragmented, underdeveloped ego structure. It's not their fault, and it's not your fault. It's the reality of the borderline triggered dissociative emotional blackout and lack of self. And no matter what you do, how much you love them, how much you care about them, how much you're willing to continue to abandon yourself and not be seen and not be heard and not be really loved, this is where the rubber meets the road in your understanding. This is where it's time for you to know that even if you still really love and care about that person with BPD, in whatever relationship type, it's now time for you to focus on you. It's now time for you to get in your own therapy and healing and recovery journey, because you can't rescue them, you can't fix them, you can't save them. You can say millions of words for, umpteen endless hours in J.A.D.E conversations, etc. You can try and try and try, but you're working at it alone. They can't meet you there. They don't have the container of self. They don't have the ego structure to be able to do it. So all the things that they do, which, a lot is abusive and it's not okay. That's not because this is all they want to do and they just want to get you and punish you, and not consciously, but still, you have to look at what is the end result of all of your efforts to love somebody who you can't even know, because you might still be looking for the person that you thought they were in the idealization phase or when you first met them, but that's not who they are. You don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. And now you're losing yourself. Don't you think it's time that you need to turn your rescue efforts and trying to fix the borderline and focusing on the borderline, obsessing? It's time to turn that inward. You need to focus on you. You need to rescue you. You need to find you again. You need to find out why you ended up in this relationship, whatever relationship type. Maybe it's a relative, etc. But you can't fix them. You can't change them. You can't save them. And you can't make them be who you wish they were. And they might be trying all kinds of things. But in that middle there, where mutuality, reciprocity, communication, and respect, and trust, and all of those healthy aspects of love need to be, people with BPD just come to the table without a self. Ego fragmented, emotionally arrested development, and they just don't have the psychic structure to be able to connect, to attach, to experience anything for what it really is in a whole way, especially when things get contradictory. Like someone might say, I really love you, but when you do this type of thing and I feel this way, I'm so hurt. People with BPD can't even hear that, because the second you're saying something about how you feel and it has something to do, they're going to feel criticized, and they're going to not hear the I really love you, but, or the I really love you, and here's what I'm feeling sometimes, and I really would like to talk to you about it because maybe we could work on it. Because you see, the real problem in a relationship with a person with BPD, there's no we in that relationship. It's all about them trying to seek identity through you, them lacking identity, the lost self, the ego fragmentation, etc., and then you, wherever you are with your codependency and why you're there and what's happening for you, but there's no we in these relationships. And you can't have a healthy relationship. You can't have healthy interdependent love of any sort, whether it's romantic love or love of a parent, love of a child, love of a sibling, love of a friend. You can't have any healthy love if two people don't come together in mutual, reciprocal understanding and without too much need. The imbalance in these relationships is largely, yes, what's going on for the borderline, but it's also how the codependent keeps on trying to get the borderline to be somebody they can't be. Why do you keep trying to do that when you're losing yourself and it hurts like hell? And the answer for a lot of people with codependency, whether you realize it yet or not, is because you simply don't know how to stop what you're doing. Because the second you stop, the second you realize that you need to focus on yourself and get into some healing and recovery work in therapy, out here to work with you if I resonate with you, the second you realize that, your pain exponentially increases, and now it's not only all about them, it's what's going on inside of you. And I've worked with so many clients, and sometimes they come back after this, right? But they'll get to this place where they really got to get back with that borderline, they say, but they don't get this base reason. Because when your pain starts coming up, because you're realizing, maybe surrendering that this relationship can't work and you've got to take care of yourself, and you can't take care of yourself and try to relate to this person, and they can't hear you and your words never land, there's no we there. And so when your pain rises, if you try to step away, or you go no contact, or partially no contact, or if they ghost you, or however this sort of like breakup starts or happens, then people want to run back. And the reason that you want to run back, maybe you still can't accept that it's not going to work, etc. But the core reason why people with codependency want to run back to the ex, or even if you've just broken up or whatever's going on, you're like, because now your pain is getting higher and higher. Is it more and more, and you don't know what to do with that? People do not know how to cope with that. And it's so involved. But at this point, you'll want to run back because you can't live with them, but you can't live without them. And you don't know what to do for yourself in that agony, the cognitive dissonance, the rumination, etc., etc. And do listen to other episodes of this podcast if you haven't, because I talk about all that and what's going on and how you become the persecutory object to the person with borderline personality disorder. And once you're put in the persecutory object role, you never get out of it, no matter what you do. So stop trying to be the codependent fixing hero and realize that this is taking even more of your known self from you, and you're abandoning yourself, and it is really harmful to you. And with all of that said, please be aware that if you know you need to get out, if you hear this and you know, like, oh my God, yes, I've been trying and I can't, and now I've heard, and now if you digest what I just said, but you need to know that you have to face your own pain, and that's why I'm out here to work with people, to help support you, to help you cope with that pain, etc., and all the other, aspects of these breakups and this devastation of realizing the relationship can't work out no matter how much you love that person, no matter how much little sweet parts they have, etc., because they do, but they're all fragmented parts that don't fit together in an organized container of self, and you can't rely on anything there either. So just know, people with codependency, the end struggle when you get to knowing this and accepting this is, well, what am I going to do with all my pain now? And what am I going to do with grief and the loss of the relationship and the loss of this person that you may well still love? But you're loving somebody who can't love you is not healthy. I hope this was helpful. Keep walking down that road to clarity, and hopefully keep, listening to and finding, if my information resonates with you, but finding information that isn't all that echo chamber, salacious, blame the borderline, they're all evil and horrible crap, and because you need to know more about you. Never mind what's going on with the borderline, in a sense. You need to know more about you, how'd you get there, what you're doing while you're hurting yourself and letting someone else hurt you, and calling it love.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.